Hi, my name is Ansley Adams, and today I will be demonstrating how to use SPSS to perform a repeated measures ANOVA using the chocolate and attitude data set in order to determine if chocolate affects attitude over time. My hypothesis is that chocolate has an effect on attitude over time, and my null hypothesis is that chocolate has no effect on attitude over time. I'm going to move forward with this demonstration by first assuming the assumptions for performing the test, including normalcy and independence, are met. However, I will check for Mauchly's test of sphericity as part of my analysis. I will begin by opening my data in SPSS. I must first set up my analysis. I go to Analyze, General Linear Model, Repeated Measures. I will name my within subject factors time. And I know that I have 4 levels: the pretest, 5 minutes after, 1 hour after, and 4 hours after. So I'm going to set 4 for my number of levels and add and click define. Now I'm going to move over my variables, and I want to make sure I do this in order. And I'm going to select EM means, move time to my display means 4, compare main effects, continue. And under options, I'm going to select descriptive statistics, estimates of effect size, and homogeneity tests, and click continue. And OK. Now to interpret my results. First, I will review the within subjects factors box just to ensure that I have set my test up correctly. And I can see that each one of my variables has been assigned a number, 1 through 4, and it's in the correct order. I can also come down to descriptive statistics and see my mean average for each attitude sample, and then the standard deviation, as well as the number of people surveyed. And the number of people surveyed does remain constant throughout that survey process. However, I do see some differences between the mean and the standard deviation, specifically with attitude _1, which of course we know is number 2. But we're going to continue to look at our test to see if these differences are significant or not. First, I must review Mauchly's test of sphericity in order to determine if the assumption is met and determine from which row of the test of the repeated measures ANOVA I can use. If it is met, I will use the sphericity assumed row. If sphericity is not met, I will use the greenhouse geyser row. All right, so the significance or p-value is 0.683. As this is greater than 0.05, the assumption of sphericity is met, and I can move forward with the sphericity assumed row. So now I'm coming down to that test. Right here, the sphericity assumed row. I can see that I have a significance value or p-value of 0.002, which is less than 0.05, meaning I do have significant difference in attitudes between 1 or more time points. I can also see that I have 3 degrees of freedom for time and 66 degrees of freedom for my error. I can also see that F equals 5.681. Now that I know that I have a significant difference, let's look at the mean values to see where those differences occur. And again, I can see that number 2 has a mean value of 83.87, which is much higher than the mean values for 1, 3, and 4. So I'm guessing that number 2 is our main outlier, but let's look at the pairwise comparisons to further understand that. Here I can see that the differences in attitudes between time 1 and time 2 had a significance of less than 0.001. As this is less than alpha, it is significant. The difference between time 1 and time 3 and time 1 and time 4 is not significant, as in both cases the number was greater than alpha. Looking at our comparisons in time 2, I can see that there was significant difference across all 3 pairings, as all 3 are less than 0.05. Lastly, to check the comparison between 3 and 4, that is 0.745, which is greater than alpha, so not significant. Last thing I want to check on my output is my partial eta squared. So I'm going to come back up to here in my sphericity assumed row and find my partial eta squared score, which is 0.205. Rounded up, that's 0.21. Excuse me, that is a very significant score, or excuse me, it is a large effect size, which indicates a substantial practical difference between the attitudes at different time points. Now to report my findings in APA. Back to my Word document. A repeated measures ANOVA was conducted, and Mauchly's test of sphericity indicated that the assumption of sphericity was met. Chi-square with 5 degrees of freedom equals 3.11, p equals 0.68. Because p is greater than 0.05, the sphericity assumption was not violated and the sphericity assumed rho was used. The analysis showed that chocolate had a significant effect on attitude over time. F with 3 and 6 degrees of freedom equals 5.68, p equals 0.002, partial eta squared equals 0.21. As p is less than 0.05, I reject the null hypothesis. As a partial eta squared of 0.21 represents a large effect size, this indicates substantial practical difference in attitude across time points. Pairwise comparisons indicated that attitudes at time 1 mean 76.57, standard deviation 6.38, and time 3 mean 79.09, standard deviation 5.73, were not significantly different. P equals 0.147. Additionally, the difference between time 1 and time 4 mean 78.43, standard deviation 6.07, was not significant. P equals 0.399. Further, the difference between time 3 and time 4 was not significant. P equals 0.745. However, pairwise comparisons indicated that attitudes at time 1 and time 2 means 83.87, standard deviation 4.99 were significantly different. P equals less than 0.001, as were comparisons between time 2 and time 3, P equals 0.010, and between time 2 and time 4, P equals 0.005. Based on these findings, I think that it is evident that chocolate does affect attitude as mean attitudes increase from 76.57 at pretest to 83.87 5 minutes after eating the chocolate bar. A practical, meaningful change. 1 and 4 hours later, attitudes steadily dropped back towards baseline, but still sat a bit above pretest level. Practically, this suggests that chocolate produces a clear, short-term boost in attitude within about 5 minutes, but the effect dissipates over the next few hours, returning close to the original level. On a 0 to 100 attitude scale, a 7-point gain is noticeable enough to matter in real-world contexts where short-term mood or attitude is important, for example, before a stressful event or activity. Thank you.